for them.
Thank you, Stefan. In case you can tell from our discussion so far about super PACs, that both Stefan and I are pretty big fans of the Colbert Report and their portrayal of super PACs as entities. And pretty much they've done a fairly good job of educating the general public about what super PACs are and what the world of super PACs is right now. But as with all things Colbert, it's important to differentiate the truth from, to borrow his term, the truthiness. And you need to understand what the realities of the situation are and what is just a little bit of blown up coverage about super PACs. And what I'm here to discuss is basically the super PAC disclosure when corporations are giving directly to these entities. Um, and in Colbert model, the super PAC world is a world of the wild, wild west, where companies, unions, independent organizations can give unlimited amounts of money. Super PACs can spend unlimited amounts of money, and the FEC is powerless to require disclosure, regulate, and a lot of that is true right now. They're still working through what regulations will be with regard to disclosure, but there are a series of advisory opinions that really set forth how super PACs are going to be treated by the FEC and how disclosure is going to be treated by the FEC, at least in the direct giving context from corporations, unions, and independent organizations. And basically what that is, the super PACs can be treated as non-connected committees, as other PACs. So in being so, they're going to be treated to the same reporting requirements that those PACs have to live up to day in and day out with the FEC. And you can see from the bottom of that slide there, that means that PACs on their regular reporting schedule, including super PACs, are going to have to give reports about total receipts and disbursements made, the names, addresses, occupations, employers of contributors who give an aggregate of $200 or more, and the name and address of recipients who receive disbursements of $200 or more from those super PACs, and also the purpose or general description of the purpose of the disbursement. And what you'll see is, at this point in time, a lot of the super PACs have been created in the last 6 months or so, so there hasn't been a lot of open reporting in that context. And that's because under FEC regulations, super PACs and non-connected committees can choose between a monthly form of filing and a quarterly form of filing. And in those non-election years, such as 2011, quarterly filers can file semi-annually. So they're pushing up against these reporting deadlines coming up at the end of the year. And with the primaries and caucuses starting early in January, their first reports were going to come out in basically pre-primary reports before those caucuses and primaries. But because the FEC allows super PACs and PACs to switch between monthly and quarterly reporting, what you've seen in the news of late is that most of those super PACs requested to the FEC to have their reporting switch from those quarterly to monthly reports so they could push their reporting back to January. So you haven't seen a lot of those reports come out early in the traditional PAC reporting context, but you will, and especially now that they're shifting to monthly context. So when a corporation or a union or an independent entity gives a contribution of $200 or more to that PAC, that's going to be itemized on those reports that come out in the first part of the year as the PACs comply with these FEC regulations and these advisory opinions. And that's not really the end all and be all of the disclosure. They're also, because super PACs are making independent expenditures, they're also subject to this independent expenditure reporting standards that are laid out here in the slide and in the packets of information that we've provided you. And that provides more than just monthly or quarterly reports. It's going to provide reports based upon the amount of independent expenditure made. So any independent expenditure of $10,000 or more has to be reported within 48 hours of being made. And as context of that report, it's going to give a discussion of what candidate was being discussed, whether it supported or opposed the candidate, and it's also going to itemize people who gave $200 or more to that particular expenditure. And then expenditure, and in the window of time right before elections, including primaries and caucuses, if those independent expenditures are made between 20 days and 1 day before, there's also going to be a 24-hour report that contains a similar amount of information. So the bottom line, and you can look on the FEC website now, there are a number of those that are available and accessible that you can look at, and you can see where contributions came from and what the contributions were designed to do. So in thinking about the Colbert model of what super PACs are, it's true that it's still the Wild West. They're still trying to figure out what the disclosure regulations are going to be in the long term. But for the time being, the FEC is treating direct contributions from corporations and unions and nonprofits and other organizations um, as subject to this traditional PAC reporting structure. So we need to understand as companies, as entities, that if we give, we're going to be giving in a context where our fingerprints are most likely going to be seen. It may not be immediately, such as in the independent expenditure reports, but it's going to be seen eventually. So that has to go into the calculus when you're sitting down and coming up with a political giving strategy.